What's up, guys? It's the Man of Dorks here. I'm here with a friend, Jimmy. He's going to be showing you a deck profile today. Brandon's out doing the event, so we took some time apart. He has a very interesting deck, and we hope you enjoy it, and you're going to get to see some details about it. And without further ado, let's get it started.
All right, so what's up? I'm Jimmy, or James, or whatever. Just a friend with the Man of Dorks. I'm not a Man of Dork myself. I'm here to show you Yuma, Proud Protector, which is a deck I upgraded throughout the entirety of Magic Fest Atlanta. I came with the Man of Dorks as their friend and roommate for the hotel room. And this has quickly become one of my most favorite decks of all time, pretty much in Commander. This deck is really, really fun, and I think a lot of people can really like this too, because it's a pre-con Commander, really, because it's very relatable. A lot of people can pick up this pre-con and upgrade it over time. And without further ado, let's get into it. So let's talk about Yuma Proud Protector first real quick. Yuma Proud Protector is a Naya commander for 5 generic and red, green, white. He is a legendary creature, Human Ranger 6/6. He costs 1 less for each land card in your graveyard, meaning if you have enough land in your graveyard, he can also cover his own commander tax.
I was going to say, that's expensive. 5 generic, 8 drop. Ugh.
Whenever he enters the battlefield or attacks, you may sacrifice a land if you do draw a card. Whenever a desert card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, including milling, you create a 4/2 green plant warrior creature token with reach. The whole strategy is centered around him and desert synergy, pretty much, to make 4/2 plant warriors, and alongside we do have some sand warrior synergy because deserts. A lot of deserts revolve around these sand warriors, and they just kind of came here. Let's talk about a few honorable mentions. I can't really find room in this deck yet for these. However, I'm more than likely going to fit them in somewhere once I find a room for them. We have Bane of Progress, which is a card that is really unfair as time goes on. Horizon of Progress, which I think is an interesting land. I don't know too well about this card, but I think it will go well in this deck. And then Dryad of the Elysian Grove, which is just a generically good green card to have in almost any land deck.
You're not wrong there.
Okay, so let's put those guys away. Let's talk about the creature base, because the creatures all do different things and they all add to the different synergy. These 3 creatures right here revolve getting land themselves. Sand Scout, whenever he enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you can search for a desert and put it onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. What you should do with this card is play him for, don't play your land yet. Play him, search your desert, then play your land for turn. This doesn't really work out if you're going first, however, so unless you feel like missing a land drop, which I don't recommend, then this may be a little bit of a deader card if you go first. However, if 1 or more lands are going to be put into your graveyard from anywhere, you also get to create a 1/1 Sand Warrior token, although only once per turn, so that effect is a little but it does come up and you do get some bodies to block. Elvish Rejuvenator is a bit of a generically good green card. I'm pretty sure even if you play budget, you have played this card probably several times. Enters the battlefield, look at the top 5, put a land that you see into the battlefield tap, put the rest in the bottom in any order, or a random order, sorry. Call it a day. And the same thing with Spring Bloom Druid. This one's also very important because we're going to sacrifice lands, which plays into Yuma very well, to then search more lands to keep the train rolling. The next group of creatures I can only really describe as milling creatures. We have Aftermath Analyst, which is a uncommon from I forget which set this was, but it's when it enters the battlefield, you mill 3, and for 4 mana you can sacrifice them and put all lands from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. That's a very strong effect, especially in certain different games, especially if you can combo off and make a bunch of 4/2 green plant warrior tokens. Satyr is a really generically good green card. Again, if you play self-mill or play any sort of land strategy, you look at the top 4, find a land, put it in your hand, put the rest in your graveyard. Also, keep in mind with the graveyard effect, if a desert goes from anywhere, you create a 4/2 plant warrior. Next up is a new addition, although I haven't played him yet, is 6. He's brand new from the Modern Horizons 3 set. Legendary creature Treefolk 2/4 with reach. Whenever 6 attacks, you mill 3, and then you may play a land among them into your hand. Very generically good. Mill a bunch of cards, get more lands to play, fuel the graveyard if you have multiple lands in your grave. And as long as it's your turn, non-land permanents in your graveyard have Retrace, which is actually very, very strong, especially in a deck that wants to mill itself and get a bunch of cards in the graveyard, so that way your graveyard becomes a secondary hand almost. And the last card is World Shaper, another generically good green card. When it attacks, you mill 3, and then when it dies, return all lands to the battlefield tapped. It serves the same purpose as Aftermath Analyst, pretty much in that regard. You just want to keep milling and keep it going, and if when the time is right, just get a bunch of lands onto the battlefield. We do run some Landfall cards. We do run some Landfall cards in this deck. The honorary mention is Titania, Protector of Argoth. She's not really a Landfall per se, however, she plays very well into Yuma in the sense that she plays around lands leaving and create 5/3 elemental creature tokens. Alongside, when she enters the battlefield, you can return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Pretty good. The Landfall cards that we play, though, is Bristly Bill. Really good brand new card from Outlaws. I only got to play this card once, unfortunately. However, the one time it was there, it was super solid. For 2 mana for a 2/2 plant druid, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. And then for 5 mana, you get to double all +1/+1 counters on the board. Which plays into Avenger of Zendikar very well, because as you know, when you play Avenger of Zendikar, you get a number of 0/1 green plant creature tokens equal to each land you control, and whenever a land enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on each plant. So you see the synergy already. With Bristly Bill, you can double and keep Avenger of Zendikar, continue giving more and more counters, and those plants are going to get really big very fast. Very fast. Another scary one, if it goes off, is Scoot Swarm. Everyone loves Scoot Swarm. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 1/1 green insect. However, if you have 6 or more lands, you create another copy of Scoot Swarm instead. This is very, very good in that regard, because this deck wants to play a bunch of lands, either from the graveyard or continue to pop from your hand, and you're going to make a bunch of Scoot Swarms, and if your opponent doesn't have a board wipe, well, they better kiss their life totals goodbye. Next, we have a very strong, brand new uncommon from Modern Horizons 3 in Territory Kohler. I played this a couple times. It's actually very good. It is a 5 mana 7/5 Eldrazi with Devoid, which means it doesn't have a color identity, Reach, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under my control, I look at the top card of my library. If it's a creature card, I may reveal it and put it to my hand. If I don't reveal the card, I may put it into my graveyard.
Oh, that's disgusting. You milling a desert, that just gives you a body.
Yep, and as many lands that you can play, you can continue that train, and if it ends up being a creature like Bristly Bill or Avenger of Zendikar, it's just more cards that's going into your hand. And lastly, just another really good, generically good card is Omnath, Locus of Rage. He's kind of boring, but he's pretty good still. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 5/5 red and green elemental creature token. And when him or one of those elemental dies, or even the elemental from Titania dies, you get to deal 3 damage to any target.
That's decent in itself.
He's decent in itself. He's just quite boring.
He's just straight line and narrow.
Yep, straight line and narrow, yep. We do play 3 cards in this deck that play lands from our graveyard. We do not play Crucible Worlds. But we do run these 3 that all functionally basically do the same thing except for Ancient Green Warden. Runevat Excavator, Perennial Behemoth, who has Unearth, who can bring himself back for a turn. But this one is very better because it not only does it have reach and it's a 5/7, but if a land entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability or a permanent you control the trigger, it would trigger an additional time, bringing you back to our Landfall creatures, especially Bristly Bill, that can get really out of control.
And I just realized the
Eldrazi says you may add the card to your hand if it's a creature.
Yep.
And if you choose not to, you can put it to the graveyard. You can essentially put this guy right here, this beast, behemoth, into the graveyard and just unearth him for 2.
Yep. Unfortunately, he'll
Be
exile
exiled.
himself at the end of the phase. However, you do get that 1 turn of playing a bunch of lands from your graveyard if you have that set up.
That's very nice.
Speaking of graveyard synergy, we play Brawn and Anger. Don't know what else to say other than when they're in the graveyard, this one gives you trample and this one gives you haste.
So you don't even need them as bodies on the board. You just drop them.
Yep, you just drop them, and we do play some discarding cards to draw cards, and they're easy discard fodder as well. They just serve the graveyard very well. They can end up being a little dead in your hand, though.
Understood.
Let's talk about just generically good green cards in a land deck. Azusa Lost But Seeking, you play 2 additional lands per turn, bringing us back to the playing lands from graveyard. Playing lands from graveyard, which allows you to just play from graveyard and continue the value train rolling. And then Oracle Moldai, you can play an additional land each of your turn, and then play with the top card of your reveal, and if it's a land, you can play it. Just generically good for a land deck.
Right on.
Talking about some multicolors is Kiri, Talented Sprout, which is a ace in this deck because it gives all your other plants and tree folk, including Bristly Bill, +2/+0. And at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you can return target plant, tree folk, or land from your graveyard back to your hand.
Oh, that's disgusting.
And then Hazazen, well, he's just a desert legendary creature. He has Desert Walk himself, which comes up never, unless you're playing against the brand new Omo commander. You may play desert land cards from your graveyard, which kind of takes us back to the other playing lands from your graveyard. And whenever a desert enters the battlefield under your control, you create 2 1/1 Sand Warrior creature tokens. Good bodies, and once you get a pump spell, they can swing for quite a bit. Next up, we're going to talk about aces that are in this deck, which is Dune Chanter, Blossoming Tortoise, and Rumbleweed. Dune Chanter is probably the best creature in this deck, full stop. It's very, very good. They printed this in the pre-con Magic, What Were You Smoking? For 3 mana, it's a 2/3. Plant Druid, which the Kiri can bring it back if it gets destroyed. As reach, lands you control on the battlefield and even in your deck are deserts amongst their other types, including your hand as well, which comes up sometimes. Which means every time a desert gets milled, you make a 4/2 desert. You see where the synergy is here? And lastly, if that was not enough, all your lands also tap for any mana of color. And if that was not already enough, he can tap himself to mill 2 cards, and you gain 1 life for each land card you mill. And also reminding you, all lands are deserts. So if you also have Yuma on the board, and you mill 2 lands, any lands, you make 2 4/2 Plant Warriors. This card is gross. What were you doing, Magic? What were you thinking printing this? But thank you anyway. Blossoming Tortoise is probably like a pet card that I insanely enjoy, and it fits this deck very well. Whenever he ETBs or attacks, you mill 3 cards. Then you return a land card from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Doesn't have to be from the 3 cards. Activated abilities of all lands you control cost 1 less to activate. And land creatures you control get +1/+1. That effect basically never pops up except for like 1 instance with 1 land in this deck. You'll see in a moment. This card's very, very good. Get multiple swings, mill a bunch of cards, make all your lands cheaper to activate. He's a star. A good turtle. And this card is just a way of ending the game. For 11 mana, it's an 8/8. He costs 1 less for each land card in your graveyard, much like Yuma. With Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and when it ETBs, all your creatures get +3/+3 and Trample.
So that's similar to like a baby Crater Hoof.
Pretty much, it's just a baby Crater Hoof, and I don't run Crater Hoof in this deck. 1, because that's expensive, and 2, I don't think you need it, to be honest, because you create so many tokens in this deck and have just generically good enough +3/+3 and getting trample effects that you kind of can afford to not play him. However, if you do have Finale and Crater Hoof, by all means play it. I just don't. Mainly because, again, it's expensive. But I do have other expansive stuff, just not that one. Let's go into my instants and sorceries, which all of them, except for one, qualify under 3 different different types, which is answers, discarding and drawing cards, or just drawing cards, and land, or mill, land and mill. The only one that doesn't is Eldamari's Call. Search your library for any creature card, put it in your hand. What else do you need?
That's really good. That's a good tutor.
Going into answers, we play the obvious Swords of Plowshares and Path to Exile. Any white deck should run these two. They're just generically good single target removal spells, and not just removal spells, but they exile them. They do have some downsides with your opponent gaining life equal to its power. Who cares? And also the opponent can search for a basic land. Sometimes they don't even search for a basic land. They all play just a bunch of different lands, so sometimes they can't get anything with the Path to Exile. However, for the most part, they always get a basic land. Another answer is Valorous Stance. This one's really, really good. You can choose one. You can either give a creature indestructible, or you can destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater.
It's really nice for 2.
It's really nice. Optionally as well, you can also run Heroic Intervention for the first part. I don't, because this deck recovers very, very well even after a board wipe, just not against a land destruction. Another really good one is Bovine Intervention. Destroy target artifact or creature. They created 2/2 White Ox. It's similar to Beast Within, pretty much, just in white.
And you give them a weaker creature.
This one's interesting. Requisition Raid. It's only 1, however you have to pay 1 for each of the additional effects, and you can pay 3 to get destroy target artifact, target enchantment, and put +1/+1 counter on each creature target player controls. If you have Bristly Build, that effect can be really, really good, and these two are just generically good stuff. Disenchant, destroy something else, it's pretty good for an uncommon. Decimate. This card is actually very, very good in this deck. I know for a lot of people they took this out because the land part kind of sucks. However, in this deck, you want to blow up your own land. So you're going to target your own land for that effect. You're going to destroy a target artifact, creature, enchantment, and then your own land. It's pretty good.
No, it's not.
And lastly, this deck only runs 1 board wipe. Why? Because you don't want to get rid of your own stuff. You would much rather just try to make a bunch of blockers, especially because they have reach, so you can get around flying, which is a big thing. And you just don't want to destroy your own board. You want to keep your board presence, and that means, unfortunately, you're going to run less board wipes. And so there's only 1 in this deck, and it revolves around deserts. It's an X spell. It deals X to each creature, and for each mana from a desert was spent to cast this, you create that many tapped treasure tokens.
Oh, so not only are you wiping these, you're getting more resources for you to spend.
Yep. It just on the instance that you do need to blow up your own board, you can at least have enough mana to rebuild if need be. I wouldn't personally run more than 1. Go ahead if you want to. Maybe Blasphemous Act will work out for you if you play Heroic Intervention, or if you have always a Heroic Intervention effect in your hand. Next up, we're going to go into our card draw. We're going to talk about Electric Relevation as an additional cost, so you have to discard it as a cost, so meaning if someone counterspells this, you still have to discard the card. 3 mana instant, you draw 2 when you discard, and it has flashback for 4. Pretty good. Just really good. I think it's better in Tormenting Voice in that regard because it can flashback, and because it has flashback. That's pretty much it. Return to the Wild Speaker. This is a generically good green card. Almost every green deck runs this card because you can draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. And for the most part, it's going to maybe get you 4 cards. However, 4 cards is still 4 cards, especially in green. And non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of the turn. Another Rumbleweed effect of just ending the game. Thrilling Discovery, you gain 2 life, then you may discard 2 cards if you do draw 3 cards. I guess you can cast this to just gain 2 life if you wanted, but...
2 mana for 2 life? Yeah, that sounds like an absolute win.
Yeah, it's a deal, man. It's such a deal. Play this only if you can discard the 2 cards. Nihiri's Lithoforming is another ace in this deck. It's just unfortunate that I don't get to really play it that often. It's another X spell. You sacrifice X lands. For each land sacrificed this way, you draw a card, and then you may play X additional lands this turn, and all your lands come into play tapped this turn. Yeah. And with the synergy, you sacrifice that many lands, make that many 4/2s.
And if you have the dude that makes everything deserts or whatever.
Yep. You just create so much, draw a bunch of cards, and play as many lands. And if you have a creature that plays from the graveyard, you can just play them all back.
That's absolutely atrocious.
I don't get to play that very often, but this card goes off when it does.
So get that out of my camera view.
Magnetic Insight. As an additional cost, discard a land, draw 2.
Not bad. That's a body and 2 cards for 1 mana.
Pretty good.
3 for 1.
Shamanic Revelation. Draw a card for each creature you control. In a token deck, really great. And you gain 4 life for each creature above with power 4 or greater. Again, you're going to be making a lot, so you can gain a lot of life from this card. The life gain isn't too important, however, it comes up sometimes. Next, we're going to talk about my land cards and mill. We have Crop Rotation, which you sacrifice a land to search your library for a land and put onto the battlefield.
And notice that doesn't say basic land.
Nope, doesn't say basic. You
And
can
it
find any land, including a desert.
And it doesn't say tapped either.
Nope. The only simulation is if the land says it comes into play tapped, it comes into play tapped.
That's a little ridiculous for 1 mana.
Entis Revelation is similar in that regard. Sacrifice the land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. If you control a creature of power 4 or greater, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards and put them onto the battlefield tapped.
That's ridiculous.
Sack a land, get a boy, continue to get develop a mana base. Harrow, sacrifice a land, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them on the battlefield tapped. Keep the value engine going. Map the Frontier, search your library for up to 2 basic land or desert cards. Always choose the desert cards. Explore, generically good. Draw a card and play an additional land this turn. Hour of Promise, search your library for up to 2 land cards, any 2 lands. Then put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. Then, if you control 3 or more deserts, create 2/2/2 black zombie creature tokens. They're just going to really be bodies to block with. However, you pretty much always have 3 deserts on the board. I would be somewhat concerned if you didn't.
Say that 3 times fast without tongue time.
I will not. And plus, you find 2 deserts, so more than likely you'll always have it.
2/2/2 black zombie. 2/2/2 black.
I know some people would say these cards kind of suck in these deck. I think they're fine. They run fine just for me. Far-Seek and Rampant Growth. Early fast mana. I understand that this deck wants to blow up lands to get lands, and these sort of cards kind of just only get land. However, I still
it gives you land to blow up.
Yeah, they give us land to blow up, and I don't know, man. I think fast mana is pretty strong. We're going to talk about our milling cards, which is Grapple with the Past. Mill 3 cards, and you may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. Any card, doesn't have to be the ones that you milled. Winding Way, you choose a creature or land, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, then put all the chosen type into your hand.
That's disgusting.
You pretty much always want to choose creature with this, unless you're really mana screwed, which if you're playing a land deck and getting mana screwed, again, I'm a little concerned. But go off. Malevolent Rumble, this is a brand new Modern Horizons 3 card. This card is actually very, very good. You reveal the top 4 cards of your library, you may put a permanent, any permanent, just as permanent, into your hand. Put the rest in your graveyard and create a 0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn that sacrifices for a colorless. This is a common, by the way. And lastly, you have Wreck and Rebuild. You choose one, destroy target artifact or enchantment, or mill 5 cards, and you may put a land card from your graveyard onto the battlefield tapped with Flashback 5. It's insanely good and is an answer if you desperately need to do that.
That's disgusting. Get out of here.
We're going to talk about our enchantments next, which is Bitter Reunion. When it enters the battlefield, discard a card, draw 2, and then for 1, you can sacrifice it. All creatures you control get haste. So if you want to do a Hail Mary with Yuma, Make a bunch of 4/2s, blow up all your lands, give them all haste. Swing. We have a brand new card from Modern Horizons 3 in the Commander deck of Omo. Desert Warfare. It's an enchantment for 4 mana. Whenever you sacrifice a desert, and whenever a desert card is put into your graveyard from your hand or library, put that card onto the battlefield under your control at the beginning of your next end step. So, going back, if you play something like this and mill 5 cards from your deck, and you come up with 3 lands, and you have Dune Chanter on the field, and they all become deserts, and at your next end step, you just put all of them back onto your battlefield. It is really, really bonkers already. And the worst part is it gets better, because at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more deserts, create that many 1/1 green, red and white Sand Warrior creature tokens, and they gain haste. Meaning if you have Dune Chanter out and you have 10 lands, you create 10 soldiers. And the worst part about this is that they don't go away at the end step. You get to keep them. It's insanely good. Play a token doubler. I don't, because I don't think there's room, but we'll find.
I was literally going to ask, how come you don't play a Doubling Season, a Parallel Lives, or even a Primal Vigor?
I don't have a room, really. There's a lot of really good cards in here. I fully recommend that you do, though, if you can afford it. I'm going to try to find a means of putting a Parallel Lives in this deck, though. I'm really going to try to fit it in. The last enchantment I have is a Saga, the Mending of Dominaria. You mill 2 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and that's Saga 1 and 2. And then for 3, you return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield and shuffle your graveyard into your library. Very good. Generic green Saga, to be honest. This deck only runs 2 mana rocks because you have so much land synergy that you only need 2 mana rocks. Sol Ring, Arcane Signet. Do I need to explain myself?
Sol Ring should be banned.
That's your opinion.
You don't need Sol Ring. It should be banned. That's too good.
You can honestly remove Sol Ring even as well, to be honest, but
It should be banned.
maybe.
I stand by my judgment.
Expedition Map, very good land searcher. 1 cost, put it down. Next turn, pay 2 mana, tap it, search for any land, put it in your hand. Pretty good. Now we're going to talk about probably the biggest artifact in this deck. It's 35 cents, by the way. Zurin Orb. Costs nothing. You can sacrifice a land, instant speed, and gain 2 life. The life doesn't matter. The fact that if you have Dune Chanter or can blow up deserts and make 4/2s at instant speed, this card's insanely broke in this deck. And the worst part is that, are you really going to blow this up? You're going to spend mana to blow up a 0-cost artifact?
Yeah, I would.
And for the most part, you can also just send Yuma into fight or flight mode, and where the player's just going to be like, alright, response, I'm going to sack everything and might make a bunch of dudes. So have a board wipe ready if you do that. And lastly, we have a battle, which is Invasion of Kaldheim. This card's very interesting. If you don't know battles, when it enters the battlefield, you choose an opponent to defend that, and you're going to try to deal it enough damage equal to that value to reach 0, and you flip it if you kill it. But when it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your hand, then draw that many cards. And until the end of your next step, you play all the cards exiled this way. And its flip effect is Pyre of the World Tree. Discard a land card, deal 2 damage to any target. And then you may discard, whenever you discard a land card, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. It's pretty good. I just don't get to play this card very often. It doesn't pop up that often. Next up, let's talk about our land base, which we run pretty much every single desert. Almost all of them, anyway. This is the new Outlaw Deserts. When they enter the battlefield, they shoot an opponent for 1 damage. I guess you could probably snipe someone with this if you did enough. You run the cycling ones as well. Keep in mind that if it goes from anywhere, you can also make a 4/2, so you can cycle them to make the 4/2. You run Runamap Ruins, a Hashtep Oasis, and a Shefet Dunes. I don't usually activate their effects. However, sometimes they can come in clutch. This one can shoot damage, 2 damage to each opponent. This one can give a creature +3/+3, and then creatures you control get +1/+1. They can only activate as a sorcery. I don't usually activate them that often. Usually they're blown up, but they may come in handy sometimes. Endless Sands Endless Sands can bring back a. Hold on. This can bring back a creature card. You can exile creatures you control and then bring them back with Endless Sands. It's a desert. Don't ever do that. Scavenger Grounds. It's just a desert. You could sacrifice a desert to exile all graveyards. So if you're playing against a Golgari opponent that self-mills, this will come in handy in that instance. Otherwise, it's just a desert.
So it's a kind of a knockoff Bojiga Bog.
Pretty much.
But you can utilize it better because it's a desert.
Pretty much. Dunes of the Dead, when it goes from play into the graveyard, make a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Comes up sometimes. So again, it's just desert by name.
So sack it, and you get a 2/2 body and a 4/4 body, equivalently 6 for 1.
4/2, yeah.
Sorry, 4/2. I said 6/2. I'm smoking.
Conduit Pylons, which is probably the best desert in this deck. When it enters the battlefield, you surveil one. That effect is really good on its own, and taps for colorless, and 1 tap create 1 mana of any color, and if you have Tortoise, it just taps for anything. Cactus Preserve, you can use this to tap for any mana that you could produce, and in 3, until the end of turn, it becomes an XX green plant creature token with reach, where X is the greatest mana value among your permanents you control. It is still a land. I never use that effect. It just taps for mana and is desert by name.
But you technically could use that as clutch if you needed it.
Yeah. This card is new from, again, Omo. Lazotep Quarry. Taps for colorless, or you could tap it to sacrifice a creature to add 1 mana of any color. You can sacrifice a Sand Warrior if you need to. And for X2 tap, you sacrifice a desert, exile target creature with mana value X from your graveyard. Create a creature token that's a copy of that, except it's a 4/4 black zombie. This comes in real handy because I don't run any returning effects like Sun Titan or anything, so this one can actually bring back creatures just by existing. And I also sacrifice creatures to, again, fuel Yuma. The effect doesn't really come up that often, though, so keep that in mind. Painted Bluffs, it's, again, really good. Taps for colors, 1 tap, any mana of any color, desert by name. Have Tortoise, it taps for anything. And then Mirage Mesa, when it enters the battlefield, choose a color, tap, add 1 mana of any color of that chosen color. So if you need red, there it is, you got it. This is pretty much almost all the deserts except desert itself and 1 other, which is the reverse of desert. You don't need them if you just need desert by names. You have plenty of deserts with this land base. Talking about generically good green lands, Dryad Arbor and Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. All your lands are forests, and you have a land creature.
But unfortunately, Dryad Arbor has summoning sickness.
He does get summoning sickness, however, but he's still a very, very good land to be playing.
A land with a stat? What is that?
Next up, we're going to just talk about generically good commander lands. Every deck should run these. Tap for a mana that's in your color identity, and tap a mana that an opponent could produce. Everyone should run it, to be honest.
Staple commander lands.
We do run 5 fetch lands, pretty much. These 2 are different. These 3 are actual fetch lands. I know one of them is very pretty. This one is the one from Streets of New Capenna. When it enters the battlefield, it immediately sacrifices itself and searches for a plains, forest, or mountain. Put onto the battlefield tapped, and you gain a life. If you have Dune Chanter out, it becomes a desert, which means it sacrifices itself to make a 4/2. And lastly, a brand new Modern Horizons 3. It's better than Evolving Wilds, to be honest, because it taps for colorless on itself, and then you could tap it to do the Evolving Wilds thing of searching a forest, plains, or mountain, put on the battlefield tapped, and additionally, for Naya, you could cycle it.
That's an overall plus, and John, it doesn't enter tap this land when you play it. So a lot of the cheaper fetch lands, they always enter tapped before you can use them, like Myriad Landscape. which is unfortunate. This is actually really nice, and it goes perfectly with your color palette.
Yeah, and it's better than Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse. Wizards of the Coast cooked with these land sets. It's very, very good. And lastly, let's talk about the basic lands. 3 mountains, 5 plains, 6 forests.
Nothing more to say about that.
Nothing more to say. Just as you wish. Now, I understand some things need to be updated. I do need to get the Pain lands, like the equivalent of Steam Vents. I also probably should get the Triome for the fetch lands, and I will get that with time. And this deck is very, very good. And the sense that, you know, I don't even run Craterhoof Behemoth or Finale or even a token doubler or anything, and it's still super strong, even for this, like, the amount of money I put into it, and I could still upgrade it, means that this commander has a lot of room and potential as you invest more money into it. And that's why I really like this deck, is especially if you don't have all these resources, this deck can still perform very well. And I even participated in Creator Clash in this event, and I even took down a content creator with this commander without Crater Hoof or a Parallel Lives or anything like that. And this deck can perform even without expensive cards.
And overall, how do you feel its power level is currently when you used it throughout the day in all the event?
7 to 8. I would say about around a 7 to 8. If you have a really bad hand, it could feel like a 6 or 5. However, it could really hang with high 8s as well, because some of the content creators that I played against had some really high power things, and this deck took them down. So it can really hang with 7 and 8 power level. I would not say it's CDH at all, and I don't know whether or not it has CDH potential. I'm not a CDH player, so look up someone else to see any information about that. However, it's a very, very good commander. It only gets better when you buy the precon and upgrade it over time. And yeah, just make a bunch of 4/2 plant cowboys, make some sand warriors, go wide.
All right. Well, guys, that was Jimmy's Yuma, the Proud Protector Desert deck. And if you guys want to see more content like this, please like, comment, and subscribe. And we look forward to bringing you more. Thank you.